Hey, this is Dawn with Metal Wani, also known as Mama Love, and I'm talking with Craig Goldy today. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Well, thank you, Mama Love. I love that. That's great.
Thanks. So, Dream Child is a relatively new endeavor for you, and I want to start out by addressing the band itself. I understand from reading a previous interview that the concept for the band stemmed from an idea between you and Serafino from Frontiers Music.
Yes.
And I'm curious how you came to recruit the other music industry veterans that make up Dream Child.
Well, Serafino asked for Rudy and Simon right off the bat.
Okay.
And luckily for me, I just said yes. Can you get me Rudy Sarzo? I said yes. Can you get me Simon Wright? I said yes. And hopefully they were interested and available because I just said yes. I knew I could get them, but I didn't know if I can get them right away. But I just said yes with a hopeful heart, And then he asked me, who would you write with? And that's how Wayne came into the picture. Because I told him, Jeff Pilson and Doogie White, Chaz West, Alessandro Del Vecchio, and Wayne and I had a band together. We were trying to put a rainbow Deep Purple of the 21st century together, and I know he could write, and he has a name from working with Michael Schenker, so he says, okay, great. And he goes, who would you have to sing? And that's when Diego came into the picture, because a friend of Diego's had sent me an MP3 of a Dio cover almost 8 years ago now, and I was just simply destroyed when we lost Ronnie. So I couldn't even think about doing original material or anything. And but I heard this MP3 of a song that Ronnie and I had written together for the album Killing the Dragon. Even though I wasn't on that album, I had written songs for that album with Ronnie, and it was just chilling. It sounded like Ronnie had covered his own song. So I got a hold of Diego, and I told him how great I thought he was, but it was just too soon for something like this. And so we stayed friends, and we said one day we're going to do an album together. And that day had come, because when Serafino said, who would you get to sing? I said, hang on a second, let me send you an MP3. And it had to be Diego. And I'm so glad it did, because he's just a monster on this record.
Right. So will you guys be doing any touring in support of the album?
We definitely want to, yeah. I mean, it's just a matter of everybody's schedule and getting in sync, and then we'll do it.
Right. I've noticed that Rudy Sarzo, you just referred to him, is referred to as a feature guest on the album. Is he not a set member of the lineup at this point?
Well, that's because Mr. Rudy Sarzo is like Ron. He's a man of integrity. At the moment, at the time of this inception of the album, he made a promise to a band called the Guess Who, and so he didn't want to just suddenly, say, okay, now I'm with Craig,
Right.
And he's just a man of his word. So at the time, neither one of us wanted this to come across like, he had double-crossed the Guess Who. So we made sure to make that it was a featured member and not an actual band member. Maybe someday, he will want to be an actual full-fledged member, or maybe he'll continue to find another, touring project that he likes to tour with. I don't know. We're just good friends. Him and I used to be in a band together before I got into Dio. When him and Tommy Aldridge left Ozzy, me and Rudy had a band together with Tommy for a year and a half before Dio, and then Rudy joined Dio, so him and I were in Dio together, and then we did the Dio Disciples together for a little while, and now this. So it would be wonderful if we could actually be, full-fledged band members, but for now I'm just grateful to have his endorsement, basically, and his name and his talent associated with this.
Right. You think he'll join in with any touring you might do?
I think so. I mean, he sent me an email of a guy that was a promoter for Dio when me and Rudy were together, who just finished up working with Rainbow, who offered a tour with us. So I don't think he would have forwarded me that forwarded me that email if he wasn't into it. I'm sure he'd be into it as long as his schedule was open. If there was an open part in his schedule, he would do it.
Right. Considering the caliber of talent that comprises Dreamchild, what direction did you want to take with your debut album, Until Death Do We Meet Again?
Well, it was basically, the mission of it was to bring back the good old days, because I had noticed that a lot of comments on YouTube for like the Rainbow Rising album and Deep Purple albums were, they don't make music like that anymore. And so that's when Serafino said, well, can you? And I said, yeah. And so that was the mission, is to try to bring back the good old days of Deep Purple and Rainbow, but try to make it sound new somehow. And so that's what we all decided, that was the mission, and so we all agreed that that's what we were going to do. So it was great that everybody was on the same page right from the very beginning, and nobody had any hidden agendas. It was just, let's bring back what the era that was once thought to be long gone and never to return, and make it sound new somehow too.
Right. How did your writing process for the album unfold? Was it a collaborative effort, or do you have a main songwriter in place?
Well, there was definitely a lot of collaboration. A lot of it was from how I learned how to write songs by working with Ronnie. So a lot of the songs were started by me, and then I would finish or piece them together with Jeff Pilson or Doogie White. Chaz West and I wrote 2 songs together, Under the Wire and Midnight Song. Wayne and I had worked together before, and so there was a couple of songs that needed. We wrote a couple of songs from scratch together, and then we also did some middle sections. A couple of songs just still needed either a twist or an unexpected turn. So him and I we wrote the middle sections for Until Death Do We Meet Again and Weird World, but we started It Is What It Is together, and Light of the Dark together we started, and so it was definitely a collaborative situation. So there was some music. A lot of the music was me. A lot of the music was me and Wayne. Some of the music was me and Jeff Pilson. Some of the so Alessandro Del Vecchio and I wrote together In a World So Cold and Playing with Fire. So I got a chance to do some lyrics and melody lines and some music and play some keyboards. And then when the song needed something that I wasn't able to do, I'm perfectly capable of being honest with myself, and I love constructive criticism. So, and I always get this nudge deep down inside that this isn't where it needs to be. So
right.
It's time to reach out to somebody else and, hey, let's finish this song together. What do you think? Do you like this? Yeah, let's do this to it, or let's do that to it. So then me and Simon were in the same room together when he did the drums, and he had some great ideas on how to change the music around in certain parts. So certain parts of One Step Beyond the Grave were altered because he had some really good song ideas, and I thought, okay, well, you play the drums that way, and I'll just change the music to fit it, and things like that.
Great. As far as the music itself, you can really hear the underlying Dio influence within the songs, which is really not surprising since you all have such a huge history together and playing with and for Dio at one point or another. How do you respond to the critics who say it's a little too reminiscent of the overall Dio sound?
Well, I understand it, because the songs that were picked to the first 3 songs are the ones that sound the most like that.
Right.
But the rest of the album really doesn't. There's as if they give it a chance and listen to the rest of the album, there's a lot of very un-Dio stuff, because the whole point of the album was to bring back Rainbow and Deep Purple, not Dio.
Right.
And it ended up, there was a song called Under the Wire that me and Chaz West wrote together. So when Chaz sang that song, it totally sounded different. But when Diego sang it, it gave it that Dio sound only because of his voice. Same thing with You Can't Take Me Down. The guy who I had sing the guide vocal to give to Diego to learn the song, it sounded like a Joe Lynn Turner Rainbow song. But because Diego got on there, it gave it that Dio vibe. It's just, I'm very influenced by Ritchie Blackmore, so there's going to be a lot of Blackmore-esque type of guitar playing on there. And Diego is very influenced by Ronnie, so there's going to be a lot of Ronnie-esque influences in there. But I never once had to ask Diego, can you sound more like Ronnie on this song? He just sang what came to him, and even before I met Ronnie, I was in a constant state of trying to find a guy who would sound like Ronnie, which is basically asking for the impossible. But, it's not my fault that I love this music. I love the stuff that Ritchie and Ronnie did together. I love the stuff that Tony and Ronnie did together. I miss that music, and I wanted, and even Ronnie told me, he goes, back in the dreamy old days, he goes, Goldy, I want to pass the torch on to you, kid, right in front of his best friend, who's his favorite tour assistant. Mm-hmm. And his tour assistant goes, man, do you know what that means? I go, yeah, I know. So even Ronnie said he wanted to pass the torch on to me, and he said in an interview that, I look forward to Craig being the leader of his own band someday. And if you put all those things together, I waited 7 years before I even got together with Diego on purpose because I didn't want people to get the wrong idea. And then Rudy and Simon were going to be my watchdogs. If it was going to be too Dio, they'd be the first ones to go, hey, Craig, you got to calm this guy down. And they were like, hey, this is great, because they heard the whole album. So once you hear the album from beginning to end, it's not a Dio record at all. It's just we sound like who we are influenced by a lot, but it's not an out and out blatant, Dio. That was not the mission. He
sounds so similar, though. Do you think that if you were to write different songs or take a different writing approach, it would not sound like Dio?
Probably, but I mean, as long as the agenda is, let's just put together a great song, and if he sings from his heart, and that's what we end up with, then I'm happy, because that's my favorite type of music. And so if he sounds like Ronnie in a couple of spots, then all that does is make me happy, because that he is and was my favorite singer. And as long as we don't set out to copy anybody and it just comes out naturally, then I'm happy.
Right. Awesome.
Because that's the kind of music I love. That's the kind of powerful voice. I love powerful voices. And my first solo album, the Ritual guys, not the stuff with David Glenn Isley, but the Ritual guys, he had a real gruff, Ronnie-like voice, and the two songs that I did as my own personal tribute to Ronnie with a guy named Mark Huff, he sounded real gruff and kind of Ronnie-ish. I've always had that kind of a voice when it came time to me doing stuff on my own. Rarely have I had a guy not sound or be kind of in that vein, because that's just the kind of music I love.
Right. So, what are your thoughts on the whole Dio Hologram tour? I know that fans are definitely divided over the whole idea of the Hologram tour. Some are in favor and some are absolutely not. So, where do you stand on that?
Well, I get it. A lot of it, it's going to be polarized. Even when Ronnie was with us, Ronnie's manager and wife Wendy and his best friend and tour assistant, they often clashed because they thought they knew what was best for Ronnie. So here's Ronnie knowing what's best for Ronnie, and then there's his manager and his tour assistant who think they know what's best for Ronnie. Then here's the record company who thinks they know what's best for Ronnie. And I was right there in the middle just watching it all,
Right.
And in a similar way we have that now. It's just that, it all comes from love. These people who don't like the idea of the hologram are because that Ronnie is so revered in their hearts that this seems blasphemous to them.
Right, I was thinking of the same word. Excuse me.
It's a lot. I say this sometimes. It's a lot like when Jesus went into the temple and saw the money changers, and he got angered and he turned over their tables. this is a house of worship, not this is not a marketplace.
Right.
So in a way, those guys see us as the money changers in the temple of Dio, and they want to knock over our tables, because that's a place of worship, not a marketplace.
Right.
But they don't understand that money's not the main purpose. Money has no heart, money has no soul, but Ronnie's music does.
Right.
But it takes money to do stuff like this. And Ronnie brought them a fire-breathing dragon, an 18-foot fire-breathing dragon, and a gigantic metal spider, and explosions and lasers, but he didn't hike the ticket prices up. He did that as his own gift to the fans. And there was a crystal ball that would come down with a rear projection, which is the closest thing to a hologram back then. That Ronnie did himself. And I think Ronnie would be, if I would think that anyone who worked as hard as he did to create such an amazing catalog such as he did would want to have that carried on by the people he loved the most, which is us. And that's what we're doing.
Right. So as far as Dream Child, I realized that your album hasn't even dropped yet. You're not even really in the planning stages for a tour, but are you looking for the future? Are you planning to put out other albums?
Oh, definitely. Well, I remember a phone call I got from Serafino. He said, "Craig, this is your band, and I want to make this as successful as possible." And that was really cool, because it was like, yeah, we definitely want to do more albums, and we definitely want to do tours, and and we want to, and he wants to make it as successful as possible. So that to me says it all right there. And I know that me and Diego became really good friends during the recording of this album, and the videos, and Simon and Rudy and I are really good friends, and Wayne and I are really good friends. And everybody got along just really good during the filming of the videos. It was just like a bunch of kids hanging out, with their friends from high school.
Right. I kind of got the impression. I kind of got that impression from watching Under the Wire.
Yeah, yeah. It was just and Jamie, the video director and videographer, he had a lot to do with that too, because he had that kind of attitude, and his crew had that kind of attitude. Everybody was just, it was a big spirit of camaraderie, and let's have fun with this.
I wanted to touch on the fact that you all have such a huge history within the music industry, and within the research that I was doing and preparing for the call, I saw the band name Jufria attached to you, and I was quite that was a huge blast from the past. I loved Jufria. I thought they were great.
Oh, well, thank you. I liked that first record was really special. Yeah, I only did the first album, and then that's when Rudy Sarzo and Tommy Aldridge had left Ozzy and wanted to form a band together, and I couldn't resist, and so I left Jafria to join them. And then after that, I got the call for Dio.
Right. Okay, well, thank you so much for talking to me and dealing with my various interruptions and things, and I really appreciate it. Wish you all the best.
Not at all.
Wish you all the best with the album when it drops, and I hope everything goes great.
Oh, thank you, Don. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Great.
Okay, well, you have a great night, and hopefully I'll speak to you soon, because I'm starting a 501c3 thing where to try to help unknown musicians, because it's just so competitive and so difficult out there, and to give them all the information that I've accumulated over the years and just hand it over to them before they even take their first step forward, because a lot of times there's a lot of hurdles that they don't know how to negotiate if they don't have the proper information first.
Right.
They can stay stuck for 5 years because it's a learn as you go program right now, unless you. And a lot of people, they hide information, because if you get the slightest peek behind the curtain, that gives you an edge over everybody else. So if you share that with somebody else, then you're creating your own competition. Technically, that's correct, but I don't think so. I think we're all different. If 10 people get the same information, 10 different things are going to happen. Some people aren't going to be an Eddie Van Halen, but they certainly deserve to maybe supplement their income. Some people don't deserve the job they have now. They deserve to be a full-time musician, but maybe they're not going to be world-renowned, but at least they can make a living and raise a family on their income as a musician. They deserve that. It's a gift from God. I mean, if they're gifted, they should have an opportunity to operate at their fullest potential. Other people, will be discoveries, and they will become huge stars, but everybody should have an opportunity. It shouldn't be so hard, and it shouldn't be so competitive. And so I'm going to try to make that happen, and make what was once wrong before I was born right before I die.
Right. That's a really great idea. How did that even come about? How did you come up with doing something like that?
Well, because I grew up in an abusive family, so I'm in and out of the hospital, stitches and surgeries and injuries. And so at 14, I lived in a car that I bought that I was too young to own, and a friend of mine's father gave me a job that I was too young to have. And all I had was a guitar. But whenever I would, wherever I would go, I would be looked down on, like I was just a waste of life. Another long-haired wannabe. Right. They didn't know that I had a destiny. They didn't know that 5 years later I'm going to headline Madison Square Garden with my favorite singer, Ronnie James Dio, performing music that we wrote together. Little did they know that was going to be part of a network where Ronnie would give me an envelope with an address, and I'd go deliver it. Turned out to be a check to help a family that was having trouble paying their rent. He did a string of concerts where people would flock to Los Angeles to be famous, but they'd end up in prostitution, guys and girls. And so he did a string of concerts to help build this doctor who was getting them off the street a shelter. It wasn't just a simple shelter. It was a complex where they would have counselors to help them with drugs, counselors to help them with the reason why they got on drugs. And they can get their GED, they can get a college degree, they can get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. They had a 10-year reunion where there was a guy who showed up peeing his pants because he was so high that he didn't realize he had to go, just totally out of it. Now he's a 4-star general.
Wow. Wow,
and it's just people have a destiny. That's just who you are for now, And so Ronnie helped me a lot. He pulled back the curtain, and he poured as much information into this little sponge that this little sponge could soak up. And he would bring me to record company meetings, and even the DIO members weren't even invited. I was still in Ruffcut at the time. And Wendy was a paralegal. She would teach me how to read and write contracts, and Ronnie's attorney, who also worked with guys like David Bowie and stuff like that, would sit with me for hours and teach me how to read and write and negotiate contracts. And Ronnie's network was high, reached high and far. I would sit in on sessions with guys who produced and engineered John Lennon, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Jimi Hendrix. Even some of those aren't with us anymore. I learned a lot from all the stuff that he showed me, and it's just like there's so much information that I've accumulated over the years that it would just be it would be heartless of me not to share it. Right. And if that meant, and I'm not going to try to get rich. It's going to be a 501c3, so it's going to be a nonprofit organization. Because Ronnie didn't make money. He might have because of the albums we did, but when he was showing me this, he didn't charge me to go with him to the record company. Right.
And this is a great story because this is the sort of thing that, an average fan would never hear about.
Right.
And, of course, you mentioned Ruffcut. That brought back I saw Ruffcut open for Dio back in like 84, 85, I think. So that's another good blast from the past. I like that. I enjoy those.
Yeah. And then at one point I was actually certified by the state of California to teach the music industry and songwriting and success strategies at college level. And then later the educators approved my class to be part of a bachelor's degree program. But then they sold the college. But so a lot of the guys who made names for themselves in the 80s were really, their egos were so astronomically huge that they didn't care what I had learned. to incorporate this. So I started turning it on to my students, and they started to flourish. And Bjorn England, the bass player of Dio Disciples, was my student.
Wow.
Back then. And then he played for Quiet Riot, and then Yngwie Malmsteen, and then Tony McAlpine, and then Dio Disciples, and so I get calls from my students saying, "Dude, I got a record deal. What do I do?" Well, I negotiated the contract for him. I get another phone call, "Dude, I got $1 millionaire to invest in my project. What do I do?" Take the money, And I went down and I structured the deal for him. Or, "Dude, I want a summer scholarship to Berkeley. What do I do?" Well, go. And I got a letter from a guy who thanked me. He says, "I make over $75,000 a year, and I just bought a $350,000 brand new home for myself, and I owe it all to you." And he goes, "Thank you for sharing the information that you did." And so I know it works, but it's just egotistical people who don't think they need to bother with it.
Right.
Don't care about it. But if I know that if you're hungry and you have a gift, even if you're the slightest bit talented, if you have the right information, you can operate at your fullest potential. Doctors and lawyers have colleges to go to. Electricians and plumbers and computer programmers, they have post-secondary schools to go to learn everything they need to know before they take their first step forward. Bartender school gives you job placement for life if you graduate in the top 5-10%. But there's no such place for musicians. But there will be.
Yeah, it's something you don't really think about as a non-musician, basically.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's so heartless. There's so many kids out there that are just filled with talent, and they just don't have a clue where to start and where to go. And it's a form of suffering. If you have that kind of gift and you have that fire, if music means that much to you, you know what it's like when music touches you in a certain way, when you're in a certain mood, you know what song you're going to listen to. It's almost like a friend. Right. You know what song you're going to listen to, and for that moment when you're listening to it, it's like you have a special connection with that music, and it makes you feel a certain way. Music is very special, but if you have that inside of you and you don't know where to go, it's just agony. Until you run into somebody who's going to try to help you, and even then, they may not even have the time to help you.
Right. That is very deep. So, okay, I'm gonna. On that note, I'm gonna let you go.
Okay.
And thanks again for talking to me. It's been a very enjoyable conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, thank you. Conversation, exactly. I love it when interviews turn into a conversation.
Good.
I love it. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you.
All right, you take care.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Okay, you too. Okay,
bye.
Bye.